Midnight Intrusion, a Halloween night to remember. On a chilly October afternoon, I headed over to my friend Dylan's house to spend the day before an eagerly anticipated Halloween costume party. Our plan was straightforward: an afternoon of video games, followed by getting dressed in spooky costumes for the evening's festivities. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Dylan and I emerged from the basement, controllers in hand, and prepared for our Halloween adventure. I had decided to go as a classic vampire, complete with a flowing black cape and fake fangs, while Dylan had opted for a modern twist on the werewolf costume, with realistic-looking fur and a menacing snarl. The party was in full swing upon our arrival. The house was adorned with cobwebs, eerie decorations, and glowing jack-o'-lanterns, creating the perfect spooky atmosphere. Laughter echoed through dimly lit rooms, and the scent of pumpkin spice filled the air. As the night wore on, Dylan and I enjoyed ourselves, dancing, socializing, and indulging in sugary treats. But as the clock struck midnight, I realized it was time to call it a night, with school looming the next day. Dylan decided to stay at the party a bit longer and promised to lock up the house when he left. I made my way back to Dylan's house, tired but excited about the night's events. The walk was short, and I arrived at the familiar front door. I fumbled for my keys in the dark and eventually made my way inside. The house was eerily silent. I tiptoed through the living room, thinking that Dylan had already gone to bed. But as I made my way down the dimly lit hallway toward the basement, I heard a strange noise, like someone moving around in the shadows. Unease crept over me as I descended the creaky stairs to the basement. I cautiously flipped the light switch, revealing a disheveled and eerie sight. Furniture was overturned and there were signs of a struggle. Fear clenched my heart as I realized someone had broken into the house. My first instinct was to call Dylan. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. It rang several times before Dylan finally picked up, his voice groggy from the noise of the party. "Hey dude, are you messing around in the basement?" I asked nervously. Dylan's voice was confused. "No, I'm still at the party. Why?" Panic washed over me as I realized that the intruder was still in the house with me. I whispered to Dylan that someone had broken in, and I needed help. Without hesitation, Dylan told me to call the police while he rushed back to the house. I stayed on the line with him, huddled in the basement corner, clutching my phone like a lifeline. I could hear the intruder's footsteps above, moving around the house. Soon, the distant wails of sirens filled the night, growing louder as the police approached. I updated Dylan on the situation as I heard the intruder drawing closer to the basement. Fear coursed through me, and I realized I needed to be as quiet as possible. Finally, the basement door burst open, and a stranger with wild eyes and a makeshift weapon in hand descended the stairs. I held my breath, tears in my eyes, as the intruder froze in shock at the sight of me. Within moments, the police arrived, guns drawn, and apprehended the intruder. It turned out that the man had mistaken Dylan's house for someone else's, a girl he had been following. In his confusion, he had broken in, not expecting anyone to be home. The Halloween night that had started with joy and costumes had taken a chilling turn. As the police took the intruder away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that Dylan had rushed to my aid and that the frightening ordeal had come to an end. It was a Halloween night that neither of us would ever forget, a tale of eerie twists and unexpected heroes amidst the darkness of a spooky October night. It was a typical autumn afternoon when my wife Sarah and I decided to enjoy a leisurely day out. We began with a delicious lunch at our favorite restaurant, savoring the flavors of the season as we sat by the window, watching the leaves fall outside. As the sun began its gentle descent, we decided to continue our day with a trip to a remote pumpkin patch we'd heard about from some locals. Eden's Harvest, they called it, a place where one could find the perfect pumpkin for Halloween. The anticipation of exploring the countryside and picking out a pumpkin filled us with excitement as we set off. The sun's warm rays painted the sky in shades of red and orange, casting a serene atmosphere over the sprawling fields of pumpkins. As we strolled hand in hand through the rows of pumpkins, the late afternoon sunlight dappled the ground with warm golden hues. It was a tranquil scene, and the unease I'd felt earlier in the day seemed to dissipate. The pumpkin patch appeared deserted, save for the soft rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. Amidst the rows of pumpkins, we unexpectedly came upon an elderly couple. They sat on an old wooden bench, their clothes slightly tattered, their eyes fixed on us with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "Welcome, young ones," the old woman crooned, her voice trembling like dry leaves. "You may pick any pumpkin you desire." Sarah and I exchanged curious glances, and she offered a polite nod of gratitude. We approached the pumpkins, choosing a large round one that appeared perfect for carving. Though a sense of unease still lingered within me, I dismissed it as mere paranoia and focused on the task at hand. As we lifted our chosen pumpkin and turned to leave, the elderly couple exchanged a knowing smile, their eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something was amiss, but I convinced myself that it was all in my imagination. Just as we reached our car and placed the pumpkin in the trunk, our peace was shattered by the sudden emergence of an angry voice. Out of the shadows stepped a burly man with a stern face, presumably the owner of the patch. His eyes bore into us with an unsettling rage. "What do you think you're doing here?" he barked, his voice laced with hostility. I stammered, We were just picking a pumpkin. We thought the elderly couple said it was okay." His face twisted into a malevolent grin, revealing yellowed teeth. "Elderly couple, there's no one else here but me." Confusion swept over us as we turned to where the elderly couple had been, but they were gone, as if they had vanished into thin air. "Listen here, you trespassers," the man growled. "This is my property, and those pumpkins are not for the likes of you. I'll call the cops if you don't leave right now." Fear began to bubble within me as I realized the gravity of the situation. The elderly couple had seemed so real, yet they had disappeared without a trace. Was this some sort of twisted Halloween prank? Before we could respond, the man's threats escalated. "And if I catch you here again, I won't wait for the cops. I'll take matters into my own hands." With that chilling warning, he retreated into the shadows, leaving us trembling with a sense of dread. We hastily got into our car, our hearts pounding with a mixture of confusion and terror. As we sped away from the pumpkin patch, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. The moon had risen, casting an eerie glow over the abandoned field. I knew, deep down, that something unnatural had transpired there. The memory of the elderly couple and the menacing owner lingered in the back of my mind, a haunting reminder that sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that blur the line between reality and the supernatural. Dark encounters on the Yosemite Trail, a haunting October getaway. The crisp October air rustled the leaves as my girlfriend Sarah and I embarked on our much-anticipated hiking trip to Upper Yosemite Falls trails. We had rented a cozy Airbnb cabin nestled in the woods to unwind after our adventures. Little did we know, our idyllic getaway would take a sinister turn. As we began our hike on the trail, we were immediately captivated by the natural beauty surrounding us. The towering trees, the babbling brooks, and the distant roar of the falls created an enchanting atmosphere. Sarah and I marveled at the scenery, our hands intertwined as we ventured deeper into the wilderness. As we ascended the trail, we noticed a figure up ahead. It was a woman standing alone at a bend in the path. Her presence struck us as odd, given the remote location and the absence of other hikers. She appeared disheveled, with wild hair and dilated eyes, and she wore a tattered dress that seemed out of place in this serene setting. Curiosity and concern got the better of us, and we approached her cautiously. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice laced with unease. The woman turned to us, her gaze piercing, and spoke with a trembling voice. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. Leave while you still can." Our confusion deepened, and Sarah asked, "What do you mean? What's going on?" The woman's words grew more urgent. "I know this place. I know what happens here. Terrible things. You need to go now before they find you." Before we could respond, she hurried away into the woods, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. We stood there, stunned and bewildered, her ominous warning echoing in our minds. After a moment, we exchanged uneasy glances, but decided to continue our hike. The encounter had left us shaken, but we rationalized it as the ramblings of a troubled soul. As we resumed our journey, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and the once enchanting trail now seemed laden with an eerie aura. Hours later, as darkness began to fall, we returned to our cabin. Unease still hung heavy in the air, but we locked all the doors and windows, attempting to find comfort in the cozy interior. Then, just as we began to settle in and convince ourselves that everything was okay, a man knocked on our door, his face obscured by shadows. We hesitated, fearing that he might be associated with the strange woman we had encountered earlier. He spoke with an urgent tone. "You need to leave this place. It's not safe." Sarah and I exchanged anxious glances. Before we could respond, we heard voices outside, whispers that seemed to come from multiple people. It became clear that the woman and this man were likely accomplices. Fear surged through us, and we dialed 911, our voices trembling as we whispered our location to the operator. Fear and adrenaline coursed through our veins as we waited for the police to arrive, knowing that our lives were in jeopardy. When the authorities finally arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the area but found no trace of the mysterious woman, the man, or their potential accomplices. They urged us to leave immediately and assured us they would continue to investigate the disturbing incident. As we left the forest behind, we couldn't help but shiver at the thought of the woman's warning and the unsettling encounter with those who seemed to be associated with her. Our peaceful October getaway had turned into a nightmarish ordeal, leaving us forever haunted by the chilling encounter in the woods.